Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to Valentine's Views for Monday. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're listening across the Big Blue View Radio Network, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, Ed Valentine of Big Blue View here. And it is, of course, roster cut down time for the New York Giants and for teams across the NFL as they trim their rosters from 90 to 53. Giants already began that process on Sunday with 11 roster moves, placing wide receiver Bryce Ford Wheaton on IR and cutting 10 other players. We have a tracker running at Big Blue View. If you missed any of those cuts, please check the tracker. Check the tracker throughout the day on Monday and Tuesday as the Giants continue to make moves to get their roster to 53. All right, what I thought we would do in my live stream on Sunday, I touched on some of the roster situations, but I thought that what I would do today is do a full roster projection show. And what I'm going to do is base the projections on the 53 man roster projection that I posted at Big Blue View on Sunday. And I'm not going to strictly go by that roster projection. There may be some changes as we go through it. Things have already begun to change because of some of the information that's filtering out, some of the things that have already happened. So this is not going to exactly replicate the 53 that I did at Big Blue View on Sunday, but it's going to be pretty close. And we'll use what I wrote, what I posted on Sunday, as the basis for our discussion as we go through it. All right, let's start on the offensive side. We'll start at quarterback. I have Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor both making the roster. I have Tommy DeVito out, but I have DeVito making the practice squad. Listen, I've gotten some pushback from people who think that I'm being tough on DeVito. But listen, I think he's an undrafted free agent. Nobody had any expectations. I didn't expect him to even make the practice squad. He has done better than expected. I think it's very, very easy to get carried away when you watch a player like DeVito in the preseason and think, oh, he should be the number 2 quarterback. He should be the backup. But I tell people, slow down a little bit. Tyrod Taylor has played a lot of football in the NFL. He's played well at times in the NFL. You want a quarterback like Tyrod Taylor on your roster if you're a team like the New York Giants who wants to go to the playoffs, who wants to have a winning record. You want to have an experienced backup quarterback who's been there and done that. Tommy DeVito has earned the right to stay on the practice squad, to develop. Maybe one day down the line, he could be number 2. But to me, that time is not now. I think he goes to the practice squad and continues to develop as the Giants keep Tyrod Taylor as their backup quarterback. Running backs, I have 4 guys making the roster, and I'm going to stick with that. I have Barkley, Matt Breida, Eric Gray, and my 4th spot I have going to Jashaun Corbin over incumbent Gary Brightwell. Brightwell's been hurt for a couple of weeks. Jashaun Corbin has done a pretty decent job. Don't bother looking at the preseason statistics for Corbin. The yards per carry doesn't look good. I don't have it in front of me, but that has more to do with the offensive line play than with anything Corbin has done. I think that Corbin has earned that spot over Gary Brightwell, who could land on the practice squad. Tight ends, Darren Waller, Daniel Bellinger, Lawrence Cager. That's pretty easy. Tommy Sweeney probably lands on IR after his medical event last week. In fact, after he missed a full season due to COVID-19 related myocarditis a couple of years ago with the Buffalo Bills. Sadly, this could be the end of Tommy DeVito's NFL career. We'll have to see. I mean, I'm not privy to the medical reports, but I just wonder, what exactly happened with DeVito the other day at practice. And I just wonder if playing football at this point is a good idea for Tommy Sweeney. Chris Myrick, unfortunately, suffered a broken hand, it sounds like, during the Saturday game against the Jets. So he could be headed to IR as well. That leaves undrafted free agent Ryan Jones as a potential practice squad candidate at tight end. Wide receiver, as I go through this, in my projection on Sunday, I had 6 players making the roster, and I'm already wrong about one of those guys. I had Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell, Jalen Hyatt, Sterling Shepard, and Colin Johnson. On Sunday, the Giants cut Colin Johnson, so that's my first miss on this 53-man roster. And listen, I until I made this projection, in prior projections, I had the Giants keeping 7 players. And I had them keeping 7, thinking that Wan'Dale Robinson, who's been on PUP coming back from his torn ACL, would be back in time for the regular season. In my projection, I said that I figured he would land on the physically unable to perform list to start the season because he missed all of training camp. He didn't practice at all. Dan Duggan of The Athletic reported during the day on Sunday that his information is that the Giants will remove Robinson from PUP and put him on the 53-man roster by Tuesday at 4 p.m., when the deadline to set the roster is. And that changes a lot of things for the Giants. That makes Wan'Dale Robinson the actually 6th wide receiver, because I think Sterling Shepard is making it. And I don't think Shepard would have been on the field the other night. I don't think he would have been returning a punt. I don't think the Giants would have been as careful with Shepard throughout training camp, giving him lots of veteran days off, managing his workload. I don't think the Giants would have been so careful with Shep if they weren't planning on having him on the roster. The question here is really whether or not the Giants keep a 7th wide receiver. And at this point, the 7th wide receiver would be Cole Beasley if the Giants keep one. I don't know how healthy Beasley is. I don't know if Beasley would accept a practice squad slot. But right now, I think if there's a 7th wide receiver, I think it's pretty much got to be Cole Beasley. I feel really bad for Bryce Ford Wheaton, who had earned praise from GM Joe Shane. He had earned praise from special teams coordinator Thomas McGahee. And it looked like his special teams potential was going to get Bryce Ford Wheaton a roster spot. But the torn ACL he suffered against the Jets on Saturday has ended his season. And we'll have to wait until next year to see if Bryce Ford Wheaton can become a player for the Giants. All right, on offense, we have to discuss now the final group on offense, and that's the offensive line. I have 9 players making the roster: Andrew Thomas, Ben Bredesen, John Michael Schmitz, Mark Glowinski, Evan Neal, Josh Ezeudu. And listen, I don't know what the starting guards are going to be. The Giants have played musical chairs at the guard spots with Bredesen, Glowinski, and Ezeudu. If it was up to me, Glowinski would be the right guard, Bredesen would be the left guard, and that would be that. I think those 2 players have clearly been better than Ezeudu throughout the summer. And I think that if the Giants want to put their best lineup on the field, I think that would be it. Glowinski at right guard, John Michael Schmitz at center, Ben Bredesen at the left guard, with Josh Ezeudu as the first guy off the bench on the interior of the line. As the other reserves, I have Tyree Phillips, who can play guard and tackle. Did a good job last year subbing for Evan Neal at right tackle. Is actually probably a better guard than tackle, though. I have second-year man Marcus McKethan, 5th-round pick a year ago. Big, strong guy who I know the Giants like. I have McKethan making the roster largely because I don't think the Giants want to risk losing him which could happen if they expose him to waivers and try to get him to the practice squad. I think on game days, the Giants are only going to dress 8 offensive linemen. McKethan would probably be the inactive guy most weeks, but I think they'll keep McKethan on the roster because they don't want to risk losing him. I have Matt Peart making the roster as well as another backup tackle. And listen, Peart was atrocious on Saturday night against the Jets. He was horrible. Committed 2 penalties, gave up 2 sacks, gave up 4 other pressures, missed a block on a run play that led to a 4-yard loss, had a horrific Pro Football Focus grade. It was an awful display for Matt Peart, and it makes you just cross your fingers and pray that Andrew Thomas stays healthy all season. But the reality of it is, even if you watch social media on Sunday, which I've done as teams begin to make roster cuts and begin to make moves to try to fortify their rosters, offensive linemen are getting shuffled all around the league. Teams all around the league are looking for offensive line help, whether that be backup interior guys, backup tackles. Everybody's looking to upgrade the backups that they have. The Giants won't be the only team looking. It's not going to be easy for the Giants to upgrade from what they already have. The Giants are 26th in the waiver claim order entering the 2023 season. That corresponds with where they were in the NFL draft order. So anybody that the Giants put in a waiver claim on after cuts are made, after cuts are finalized on Tuesday at 4:00, anybody they put a claim in on, they won't be awarded that player unless the 25 teams in front of them do not claim that player. And the way that teams are so needy when it comes to offensive line help, I can't imagine that the guys who would be the top guys that might get released, I can't imagine any of those guys actually falling to the Giants that far down in the waiver priority order. So it's as much as Matt Peart has not played well this preseason, as much as he makes everybody nervous because his play just doesn't seem to match his athletic traits, it's going to be very difficult for the Giants, I think, to find someone on the waiver wire or in free agency who is a clear upgrade from Peart as a swing tackle. All right, let's turn to defense, and we'll start with the defensive line. In my projection on Sunday, I have 6 defensive linemen making the 53-man roster as of 4:00 on Tuesday. The reality of it is, going into week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys, I only expect the Giants to carry 5. I expect them to carry Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Rakeem Nunez-Roches, A'Shawn Robinson, and highly impressive 7th-round draft pick Jordan Riley as their 5 defensive linemen. In my projection, I have second-year man Ryder Anderson making the roster, and that is because I think that what's going to happen with Anderson, who suffered a triceps injury early in training camp, Brian Daboll said on Sunday that Anderson's still going to be a little bit yet before he's ready to play. I think that what's going to happen with Anderson is he will be on the roster on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, Anderson will be moved to IR, short-term IR. And that's NFL bookkeeping. The way that it works is, if they IR him without putting him on the 53-man roster, if you IR any player before he's on the 53-man roster, he's lost for the entire season. So what the Giants would probably like to do here with Anderson, and what I'm assuming that they'll do, is put him on the 53, and then on Wednesday they will move him to injured reserve where they could bring him back after 4 games, after a minimum of 4 games, to supplement the defense, to supplement the defensive line when he, theoretically should be much healthier than he is right now. But that's a lot of the roster management, the roster sort of juggling that happens at this time of year. The roster that you see on Tuesday at 4 p.m. is not going to be the roster that you see by Wednesday afternoon. It's not going to be the roster that the Giants have in week 1 when they face the Dallas Cowboys on September 10. It's an initial roster. So really you'll see some juggling even, once this roster is announced. And the defensive line here with Ryder Anderson is a place where I expect that to happen. Second year man DJ Davidson didn't play on Saturday. Coach Brian Daboll said that that's sort of the rehab plan for Davidson. They really didn't think he was ready for game action. I expect Davidson to probably land on the practice squad. Giants will pass him through waivers, and considering that he hasn't played at all this preseason and that he suffered the torn ACL last year, I don't think anyone's going to claim Davidson because they just don't know exactly what they'd be getting. So I think Davidson clears waivers and makes it to the practice squad. Next up, I have the edge position. And in my initial projection, I have only 4 edge rushers. I have Kayvon Thibodeaux, Azeez Ojulari, Jihad Ward, and Tomon Fox. And I have O'Shane Ximines, who was a backup last year. I have him out in this projection. And the reason for that is I look at the acquisition the other day of Isaiah Simmons, and Isaiah Simmons will be listed as an off-ball linebacker, but Isaiah Simmons is a guy who will likely play off ball some. He'll play out on the edge some. He'll be a chess piece for Wink Martindale on defense. I think that the presence of Simmons makes it less of a need for the Giants to carry a 5th edge rusher. But I could see O'Shane Ximines landing on the practice squad, although I don't have him there currently. But if he passes through waivers, perhaps he lands there just as an insurance policy for the Giants. But I think they can get by with 4 simply because of the presence of Simmons. That leads me to the inside linebacker spot. I have 5 inside linebackers. I have Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, I have Simmons, I have Darian Beavers, and I have Carter Coughlin. As the odd man out here, I have Cam Brown. Cam Brown, special teams player, very good special teams player, in fact. But Brown has missed 2 or 3 weeks now with an injury. He's never developed into a guy who really could help the defense, could be trusted on defense. I think he only played 3 defensive snaps all of last year. We saw Saturday night that Carter Coughlin, in an emergency, can hold his own defensively, had a couple of tackles for loss in 15 or 16 snaps, something like that. Not a guy that you want playing a high number of snaps, but a guy that in an emergency I think could hold his own as a run defender and maybe even add something to the pass rush. But I think I think that's 5. I think Beavers can maybe go outside if you need him to go outside on occasion. Coughlin can go outside. That's something he did in college, and he's done a little bit for the Giants as well. So with Simmons and Beavers and Coughlin on the roster, I just don't see a need for a 5th true edge defender. At cornerback, I have 6 players making the roster in my Sunday morning projection, and I'm not sure that 6 players are going to make the roster. The way it worked out, I had an extra spot, and I gave it to one of the cornerbacks. I have Adoree Jackson, Tay Banks, Trey Hawkins, Cordale Flott as 4 locks to make the roster. In my projection, I gave spots to Darnay Holmes and Amani Oruwariye to fill out the cornerback slot. I have Zion Gilbert, who suffered a hamstring injury Saturday. I have Gilbert going to the practice squad. Aaron Robinson, who's been on PUP the entire preseason, starting the season on PUP. We've heard nothing about Robinson coming off PUP, so the belief has to be that he won't be part of the 53-man roster when the season starts. I think that Oruwariye and Holmes, if only one of them makes the roster or if both of them make the roster, their roster positions would have to be considered very tenuous. I think that the Giants could easily look for someone on the waiver wire to supplement the cornerback spot. I think Holmes makes the roster the way that I have it now, provided he's willing to take a pay cut, simply because the Giants are starting Adoree Jackson in the slot. They determined in the offseason that they preferred Cordale Flott outside, so they need a backup in the slot. Zion Gilbert is hurt. I don't know if he'll be ready to open the season. So Holmes sort of makes the roster by default. Oruwariye is a veteran player who honestly I didn't think was great in the summer, but I have Oruwariye making the roster as insurance on the outside. We'll see how that turns out. Uh, let's go to safety, the last position on the defense, and I have 5 safeties making the roster. I have Xavier McKinney, I have Jason Pinnock, I have Dane Belton, I have Nick McLeod, and the 5th and final safety spot I have going to undrafted free agent Alex Cook, who had a pretty impressive preseason, was very, very active Saturday night against the Jets. And listen, that spot for me would have gone to 7th round pick Gervarius Owens. Owens suffered a hamstring injury on Saturday against the Jets. I don't know what the severity is, but just working off the possibility that Owens would not be ready week 1, I'm giving that spot to Cook. I also have veteran safety Bobby McCain, signed in the offseason as a free agent. I have McCain not making the roster either. Honestly, I think if Owens is healthy, I think Owens gets the spot over Cook. We'll find out. We'll find that out in another day or so. But I'm just thinking that most likely Owens will probably not be ready to play against Dallas, which means that that he could wind up on IR. He could wind up pass through waivers as the Giants hope to get him to the practice squad, one or the other. And Alex Cook gets that spot. Special teams is pretty obvious. I have Graham Gano as the place kicker, Jamie Gillen as the punter, and Casey Kreider as the long snapper. Really nothing to see there. Pretty obvious watching the game the other night that Graham Gano, with his 56 and 57-yard field goals, Graham Gano hasn't lost anything. Also, pretty obvious that that Jamie Gillen still has a hard time punting the ball where it needs to be punted. Outkicked his coverage for the second time in 3 games on Saturday night. A 62-yard punt where he was very, very fortunate that the Jets return man stepped out of bounds after a 20-something yard return, because that could have easily been the second punt that Gillen had returned for a touchdown this preseason. But as of now, I have Gano, Gillen, and Kreider taking the 3 spots as specialists for the Giants. And that's a look at my 53-man roster projection, Giants fans. We'll see how close I get to being correct here over the next day or so. Deadline for setting the initial 53-man roster is 4 p.m. on Tuesday. Waiver claims can be made over the next day or so. Following that, waiver claims will be announced Wednesday at noon. So we'll find out who the Giants are able to add. Also, there are vested veterans, guys with at least 4 years of experience in the league who are getting cut, who will not be subject to waivers. Those guys can sign with anybody. Those guys would be free agents. Maybe the Giants can get help on the offensive line or at cornerback from from a vested veteran who doesn't have to pass through waivers. We'll see how it goes. But again, the roster that you see Tuesday afternoon is going to change by Wednesday afternoon, and it'll probably change even more than that before the September 10th opener against the Dallas Cowboys. All right, Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.